The Spitfire is one of the most iconic planes to come out of World War II. Instantly recognizable, it drew favorable comments from those that flew it and those that fought against it. Due to the Lend-Lease program, some Spitfire Mark 5Bs and Mark 9s also found their way into the Soviet Union. However, the Soviets were not exactly impressed when they received their first Spitfires. So how come the Soviets didn't like a plane that was loved by so many? Let's find out. Now, one of the things that is often said to be the cause of the negative feedback Soviet personnel gave to foreign equipment was that there was an institutional barrier that insisted on downplaying the performance of non-Soviet equipment. However, this does not account for the fact that on occasion Soviet soldiers and pilots did report positively on Lend-Lease material sent throughout the war. One clear example would be the P-39, which was generally liked by Soviet pilots. As such, Soviet criticism of foreign material shouldn't be put off as simply a product of propaganda, but placed within a contextual scope. It should also be mentioned that the conditions on the Eastern Front were not favorable to a lot of the equipment sent there. The Spitfires were no exception to that, so it is no surprise that criticism of the material exists. Yet, for the Spitfire Mark 5B, there were good reasons why the Soviets didn't particularly appreciate this aircraft. First off, the planes they were given were hand-me-downs. Some of them flew operationally since 1941. Nearly all had seen major repairs done to them at some point, and this did impact their performance. Second, the plane was essentially 2 years out of date and had difficulties holding its own against the German fighters. Third, some of the original equipment were removed and replaced with poor quality substitutes before being sent to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union also received no manuals, so the crews had to figure out how to use and maintain the planes themselves. Fourth, Soviet pilots knew that the RAF had better alternatives, like the Spitfire Mark 9. Fifth, by now the Soviet aviation industry had recovered and upped its game, supplying the Red Air Force with fighters that far surpassed their older counterparts in both quality and performance. Soviet pilots also did not appreciate the gun arrangement on the Spitfire, which they felt provided insufficient centralized firepower. It is thus not hard to see why Soviet pilots didn't exactly jump at the chance of flying a Spitfire. Instead, it pretty much made them feel like they drew the short straw. However, Soviet pilots also responded positively to the metal construction of the Spitfire, which did far better against German cannons than their wooden aircraft. They also responded favorably to the controllability of the Spitfire and reported that she was generally a joy to fly. When the Spitfire Mark 5B saw service in the Battle of Kuban 1943, other unforeseen problems emerged. Soviet squadrons and AA gunners were unfamiliar with the type. This led to a number of friendly fire incidents, making pilots feel rather uneasy when flying their new aircraft. However, Soviet pilots are also fair in their assessment when they admit that the early sorties flown with Spitfires were conducted in a manner not contributing to the strength of the aircraft. As one pilot recounts, patrolling a designated area at low speeds and being tied to points on the ground, the force of Spitfire was unable to maneuver freely and coordinate the actions of its pairs and fours. The enemy fighters, using their altitude advantage, attacked us without hindrance. The Germans, however, were also surprised of seeing Spitfires in the east. As Günther Rahl recounts, "I wrote a summary of the battle, in which I noted the appearance of the Spitfires on the Eastern Front. My group commander asked me for the time being not to discuss what had happened. Perhaps you were mistaken, Rahl. All this will only alarm your comrades. I responded that it was more likely that tomorrow we would encounter a large number of Spitfires in our sector of the front." As time went by, Soviet pilots developed better tactics with the aircraft, but never fully warmed up to it. The maintenance crews also often lacked required spare parts. It is thus no surprise that the Spitfire Mark 5B was fairly quickly withdrawn from the fight and relegated to squadrons in the hinterland. Later on, the United Kingdom would send over 1,000 Spitfire Mark 9s, but the Soviets never really warmed up to this aircraft either. Considering the change in the balance of the war and the difficulties of integrating the aircraft within their armed forces meant that the Mark 9 saw relatively little service as well. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you would like to know more about the Soviet IL-2 Sturmovik, check out this video. And if you want to know what aircraft the Germans had planned for their aircraft carrier, the Graf Zeppelin, click here. As always, have a great day, good hunting, and see you in the sky.